Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of polished floors, whispered glances and rice that could make or break your social standing. Welcome to the medieval Korean court, deep in the heart of the Joseon dynasty, where breakfast isn't just a meal, it's a performance, a prayer, and if you're not careful, a trap with side dishes. Imagine waking up before the sun, not to enjoy a peaceful cup of tea, but because you have to make sure your chopsticks match your robe and your bow matches your bloodline. You probably won't survive this, at least not without accidentally offending a prince by chewing too fast or picking up the radish before the seaweed. But don't worry, you won't be banished tonight. You're just visiting. Quietly. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when the Bedtime History Club is tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake on a woven mat, the silk blanket slipping off your shoulder as the pre-dawn cold sneaks into the corners of your chamber. It's dark, not nighttime dark, but that moody blue hush just before the day announces itself. You're not alone. In the hallway beyond your door, footsteps are already moving soft and urgent. Servants, officials, whispering, bowing, shuffling scrolls. The court never really sleeps. It just changes rhythm. You rise, careful not to wrinkle your robe. It's pale blue today, which signifies mid-level court status. Not too low, not too visible. A sweet spot if you're lucky. You slip on your shoes embroidered flat quiet and tie your sash with a precision that would impress even the royal seamstresses. Outside the palace grounds hum with early movement. The stone paths are slick with dew, and the lanterns still burn in long rows, their orange light swaying with the breeze. You head toward the Hall of Eternal Tranquility. Not that anyone inside it feels tranquil, but because that's where the royal day begins. At the far end of the hall, the kitchen annex pulses with heat. You're not going in there just yet, but you smell it: steamed rice, dried fish, beef, broth, and something faintly pickled. The scent lingers in the air like a prayer. You bow as you pass the entrance, even if no one sees, just in case someone is watching. Someone always is. Historians still argue whether morning meals in the Joseon court were ceremonial leftovers from shamanic rites, or strictly Confucian discipline in edible form. Either way, they were structured sacred and incredibly quiet. No one clattered dishes. No one dared speak out of turn. And certainly no one arrived late. You make your way to the side gate where a group of attendants gathers in formation. All of you will serve or observe the king's first meal of the day. It's not breakfast in the sense of crispy toast and orange juice. It's an orchestrated sequence of dishes presented, evaluated, and if you're lucky, praised in silence. But before that, there's preparation. You kneel briefly to adjust your cuffs. They must sit just right, half an inch above your wrists, never touching the dish, never dipping into the broth. You think of the story from last year when a minor official's sleeve caught in the soup bowl. He claimed it was a breeze. No one believed him. He now works in the outer provinces charting rice storage units. As you stand again, the sky begins to shift from ink to silver. A rooster cries in the distance, probably unaware that the court moves faster than birds. The rice has already been washed 5 times. The broth has simmered since midnight. And now it's almost time. Your hands are cold. You hide them in your sleeves the way senior courtiers do when waiting. Not from chill, but from decorum. To fidget is to show anxiety. To show anxiety is to admit weakness. And weakness? Well, that's for the poetry books, not the palace. The king has not yet appeared. That's expected. He arrives last. Always. His entrance will be announced by the flutter of a fan, the rise of silence, and the shiver of everyone standing a little too straight. But that's later. For now, you exhale slowly. The sun hasn't touched the eastern roof tiles yet. The air smells of bamboo and steam. And somewhere behind the wall, the royal rice is ready. You shift your weight just slightly, careful not to let your shoes squeak on the polished floor. The kitchen complex is finally visible now, low tiled roofs trailing steam like whispering dragons. You approach the threshold, bow once to the small altar just outside the door, then step in with the kind of reverence normally reserved for libraries and funerals. Inside, the air hits you like a slow tidal wave, warm, rich, and densely layered. It's not chaos, though. At first glance, it might appear that way. It's choreography, controlled, intentional. Over 50 kitchen workers move in precise rhythms around each other. No shouting, no clatter, only the muted percussion of knives hitting cutting boards and ladles dipping into brass pots. You're not here to cook, perish the thought. You're here to observe, to assist if required, and to understand the meal before it is ever touched by the royal lips. Because in this court, knowing what's served is almost as important as how it's served. One misplaced mushroom, one improper cut of radish, and it becomes not just a mistake, but a message. And in a palace built on meaning, messages matter. You pass by a preparation table where 4 cooks are slicing thin sheets of mung bean jelly into matchsticks. The slices are measured against a carved bamboo ruler. Not for looks, well, okay. Also for looks, but primarily for consistency. The king's dishes must appear effortless, even if they require 40 hands and 6 hours of silent debate. To your left, a row of brass bowls is being inspected. One woman senior, you can tell by her purple trim, lifts each lid, checks the temperature with her palm, hovering an inch above the rim, then replaces it. She doesn't speak. She simply moves to the next, and the next. Like a temple bell, tolling wordlessly down the line. The hearth at the back crackles softly. Rice cooks in clay pots buried in sand beds, heat evenly distributed to prevent scorching. This is the good rice too, not the commoner's kind, but the polished short-grain variety that glistens when served. Each pot is tagged with a wooden chip that indicates who will receive it. You notice that the queen's rice has a thin strip of ginseng root tied to its label, a subtle nod to her recent illness, or maybe just court gossip manifested in starch. Historians still argue whether these minute details, the angle of sliced turnips, the placement of bean sprouts, were dictated by Confucian etiquette, or the invisible rules of palace hierarchy enforced by centuries of habit. You suspect both. Because here, even a vegetable is never just a vegetable. You're handed a small tray, a test tray used to check for flavor balance. It's not for you, of course. It will go to the royal taster, a position both revered and slightly pitied. You carry it with both hands, steady, eyes down. No bumping, no peeking. Just step. Breathe, deliver. The royal taster accepts it without looking at you. He bows slightly, lifts the lid, sniffs, then nods. That nod means 50 people can continue working. You exhale quietly. In one corner of the kitchen, something unexpected is happening. A servant drops a wooden ladle. It hits the floor with a clack, echoing sharply. Everyone freezes. For 2 full heartbeats, there is no movement. Then one of the senior cooks steps forward, retrieves the ladle without speaking, and replaces it with a clean one. The offender bows so low her forehead nearly touches the floor. It's not that she's afraid of punishment, though demotion is possible. It's that she's broken the silence. And here silence is part of the recipe. You move to the back alcove now where the sauces are prepared. Soy, perilla oil, chili paste, though only a whisper of it. The bowls are arranged like a painter's palette. Each dip, each brushstroke across a dish changes not just taste, but tone. And no two dishes must carry the same tone. That would be redundant, lazy, disharmonious. A bowl of pickled lotus root is passed down the line. Thin, almost translucent. It shimmers like glass. This will go to the crown prince, who has a preference for foods that resemble poetry. You glance at the sundial outside the window. Nearly time. The final dishes are sealed with tight silk lids. The rice is lifted in insulated trays, each wrapped in cloth to preserve warmth and dignity. The procession begins. You step back as the kitchen floor clears and the servers line up with trays balanced perfectly. On one hand, the other hand resting lightly at their side. They look like dancers poised on invisible cues. No speaking, just breathing and walking. You bow as they pass, feeling the heat of the rice still radiating from the silk-wrapped lids. This isn't just food, it's diplomacy. You follow the procession as it winds through the covered corridor, the lacquered trays swaying gently with each step. No one speaks, no one coughs. The servers move like mist, their footfalls muffled against the polished wood. The doors to the royal dining hall tall, painted in deep vermilion with brass fittings that glow in the morning light. Wait ahead, like guards who demand not passwords but posture. Before you can even think about approaching the inner chamber, there's a ritual to complete. No, it's not about prayer. It's your hands. You arrive at a low table just outside the dining room where a row of white porcelain basins sits atop embroidered cloth. The basins are filled with warm water infused with chrysanthemum petals, sliced ginger, and mugwort. You don't plunge your hands in like you're rinsing off after a picnic. You lower them slowly, deliberately, as though the water might judge you for rushing. The court attendant beside you nods. That's your cue. You begin the 12-step hand-washing process, 12 distinct movements that have less to do with hygiene and more to do with social choreography. Each step reflects your place in the hierarchy, your understanding of ritual, and your ability to pretend this isn't exhausting. First, dip both hands, palms down, no splashing. Second, lift and rotate clockwise. Third, let the water fall from your fingertips back into the basin, not your robe. Fourth, dry with silk embroidered with peonies for lower officials and phoenixes for royalty. And so it goes. 12 steps. You've practiced this more than walking. You're still not sure which part makes your fingers ache more. The water turns slightly cloudy from someone else's rinse. You never go first. That's not your role. You're not royal. You're acceptable, safe, expected. Historians still argue whether these hand-washing rituals were imported directly from Tang China, or if they evolved in response to Korea's own fusion of shamanism, Confucianism, and high-maintenance sensibility. Either way, no one skips them. The one courtier who once tried was mysteriously reassigned to the Ministry of Sanitation. Coincidence? Probably not. You dry your hands and step aside. Next is scenting. A servant holds out a wooden box with compartments of powdered incense. You choose the one you've been trained to prefer juniper root and cinnamon ash. Not too floral, not too assertive. You rub a small amount between your palms and behind your ears, then step into position. The procession begins again. The first server steps forward and vanishes into the hall. Then the second. Your third. You inhale. You exhale. You walk. The door is open for you, not by magic, but by two men whose faces you never see. Just glimpses of their gloved hands and the soft swish of brocade sleeves. Inside the dining chamber is both enormous and intimate. The ceiling soars above you, painted with constellations, dragons and the phoenixes of royal legitimacy. The floor is a mirror of polished black lacquer. The smell is gentle, not of food, of lacquer, of incense, of ancient silk that has absorbed 100 generations of breath. You kneel at the designated spot and place your hands neatly atop your thighs. Your tray is already gone taken by someone higher up, someone whose job is to handle things. Your job now is to be still and aware. At the far end of the room, the king's seat remains empty. That is not alarming. That is expected. The king does not enter until everything is precisely aligned. Tables, trays, bodies, and moods. You scan the arrangement. Low lacquer tables spaced with mathematical precision. Cushions aligned so exactly you could use a ruler to find their center. Every dish already placed, covered in silk or brass, waiting for permission to breathe. Then the fan stirs. A servant at the back raises a long-handled fan, white silk painted with 5 mountains and a red sun. It doesn't flap. It glides. And the moment it does, the room shifts. Everyone bows first to the floor, then halfway up, then again. No one speaks. No one looks. You hear him before you see him. The rustle of heavy robes, the soft chime of jade beads. The king. He walks the room's length in silence, each step a declaration. He does not nod. He does not smile. He simply moves. And when he sits, the entire court exhales. Quietly, as one. Your palms are slightly damp again. You resist the urge to wipe them. The ritual said you're clean. Let that be enough. Servants approach from the side chambers, unveiling the dishes in a synchronized motion that could only be taught by someone with the patience of a glacier. Lids lift, steam rises. The room fills with the scent of boiled beef, pine, mushroom, ginseng porridge, and garlic oil, carefully balanced so no single aroma dominates. The balance, after all, is everything. You don't reach for anything. You wouldn't dare. The first motion belongs to the king. And that motion, when it comes, will signal the entire court it's safe to begin. The room doesn't breathe until he does. The king, seated at the center of this culinary constellation, lifts a single chopstick, just one, and gently stirs the surface of his soup. It's not a casual move. It's deliberate, rehearsed, and symbolic. With that quiet ripple across a bowl of oxbone broth, the meal officially begins. Your own tray sits in front of you now, uncovered and immaculate. A small bowl of rice gleams like polished pearls. The soup, mild but fragrant, steams gently beside it. Between them, an orderly row of banchan. Those elegant little side dishes rests on lacquered saucers. Fernbrake, sesame, spinach. Lotus root, dried anchovies. Each one assigned a position like a court title, and just as political. You bow once hands folded, then lift your spoon. Not your chopsticks. No one reaches for chopsticks first. Not unless they want to trigger the royal version of a record scratch. Soup always comes first, and not for nutritional reasons. It's about sequence. Order. Ritual. Your spoon touches the broth lightly, just the surface, like a leaf on water. You take a sip. Salted just enough. Clear, but rich. The kind of soup that pretends to be humble, but secretly has its own courtly ambitions. No one talks. That's the rule. But everyone notices. The sound of utensils, the motion of arms, the angle of your wrist. If someone picks up a side dish too quickly, it says they're greedy. Too slowly, and they're signaling indifference. That noble from the Eastern Bureau just spent 6 seconds hovering over the spinach. Intentional. Probably. A snub. Possibly. A future demotion. Pending. You keep your movements slow, synchronized with those around you. The spoon rests after each sip. Chopsticks are lifted with a breath. You reach for the fern break safe neutral and take a small bite. You chew once, twice, then pause. Because you hear it. A cough. Soft. Controlled. But unexpected. The man, 3 cushions to your left, made a noise. And now, like ripples in a pond, the court notices. Not directly, of course. No one turns. But eyebrows shift. Eyes flicker. Historians still argue whether court etiquette in the Joseon era was more about preserving hierarchy or suppressing spontaneity. But here in this moment, you realize it's about equilibrium. No one person can disrupt the balance. Not even with something as human as a cough. You take another bite, this time of the lotus root, its honey glaze softening the chew. And then you bow your head slightly. Not to anyone in particular, but to the moment. A tiny act of reverence that says, "Yes, I understand." Next, you notice the rice. Always served in a brass bowl. Always warm. Never boiling. You lift the lid. 2 fingers. Never the whole hand. And let the steam rise like a silent offering. You don't stir. That would suggest dissatisfaction. You take a single spoonful from the side, flatten it, and bring it to your mouth. It tastes of restraint. Polished, bland, and oddly comforting. Like a bed made too tightly. Someone across the room reaches for the kimchi too early. Bold. The red spice clings to their chopsticks like a scandal. You don't look, but you feel the room's reaction. Too spicy too soon. Kimchi is for balance after the midpoint of the meal. Everyone knows that. Well, almost everyone. You return to your soup. And then come the boos. Subtle ones. Between bites. A nod from a junior official to a senior one. A silent thank you for the side dish that arrived slightly warmer. A faint bow from the queen's cousin to the consort's uncle, probably a gesture of delayed apology. No words are exchanged. Just angles of the spine. Inclinations of the head. Here gestures do the talking. Your eyes scan the table again. The royal pickle tray is approaching 3 attendants, carrying it like a holy relic. It will make the rounds, offering rare pickled delicacies to select diners. If you're offered one, it's a sign of favor. If not, well, better to pretend you're full. You sit straighter. The tray nears. It stops 2 cushions before you and passes. You exhale slowly. Not disappointment, just data. In the palace, everything is information. Who eats first? Who speaks second? Who bows and who nods? Even what you don't eat says something. Especially what the king leaves untouched. He hasn't touched the squash yet. You take that as a sign. You leave yours too. Your chopsticks hover above the pickled radish, but you pull back just in time. The Queen Dowager has just reached for hers, and the unspoken rule is simple. Never move in sync with a superior, unless you want to look like a social echo. You shift instead to the simmered mushrooms, soft, savory, served in sesame oil, and place one gently on your brass spoon. Small movements, small sounds. Everything restrained, deliberate. Your spoon touches your lips as you pretend not to notice the subtle humiliation unfolding 3 cushions down. A minor official, dressed slightly too brightly for his rank, has just fumbled his chopsticks. The metal clinks against his brass bowl, sharp, unnatural, like a pebble dropped in a still pond. The noise ricochets across the room. No one reacts, not with words. But 30 pairs of eyes glance, register, and forget. Officially. Unofficially. He's now a story. You hold your own utensils more carefully. Korean court chopsticks are metal flat-edged and surprisingly weighty. No smooth bamboo grip here, just polished silver or brass cool to the touch, whispering reminders of your place. You don't clench them. You balance them, one between the middle finger and thumb, one between precision and panic. You lift a slice of rolled omelet gently, like cradling a scroll you're not qualified to read. You set it on your spoon layer, a dab of anchovy sauce beneath, and eat it in one motion. Clean, quiet, non-threatening. Exactly how you're supposed to behave. Historians still debate whether the Joseon court adopted metal chopsticks purely for hygiene rank display, or some complex fusion of Confucian symbolism. Some say it was about detecting poison. Others argue it was to discourage overeating. Metal cools fast after all. But in your fingers right now, they feel like performance tools, and failure noticeable. You finish chewing before glancing up again. At the royal table, the king is halfway through his rice, barely touching the banchan. The court musicians in the adjacent room continue their soft Gayajia melodies. No lyrics, just sound, an ambient reminder that time is moving, even if conversation isn't. Then you see it. The head servant approaches the king, kneels, and quietly offers a refill. Not of soup, of utensils. His chopsticks have been replaced. Not because they broke, because it's expected. Each set is used only for a portion of the meal, replaced like chapters in a book. You glance at yours and wonder, will you be offered a second pair? Probably not. That honor is reserved for people with titles that begin with royal and end with treasurer. You take another spoonful of rice and adjust your sleeve. Even that matters. Your sleeve should never drape too far over your plate, nor pull back to expose the wrist entirely. Just the right amount of forearm, enough to suggest elegance, never indulgence. The textiles themselves carry meaning too. Embroidered cuffs. You're either nobility or lying very convincingly. Plain hem with fine stitching. A bureaucrat's dream. Across the room, someone shifts their cushion. A bold move. Cushion adjustments during a royal meal are generally frowned upon, unless you're in visible pain or outrank at least 3 people in the room. The one who moved, a provincial delegate. Young, likely inexperienced, definitely sweating. His sudden height change forces those around him to subtly recalibrate their eye levels. Because here, even your height while sitting reflects social calibration. You reach for your barley tea and take a small sip. It's cooled just slightly, pleasant, nutty, with a roasted undertone. Not meant to steal attention, just meant to exist quietly, like the royal historians in the back, who are possibly recording every blink of this meal. Then just as you place your cup down, the Queen Dowager coughs. Everything stops. Not visibly, but internally. In that micro moment where breath halts and bodies freeze. The king glances barely, but it's enough. 2 attendants glide across the floor and offer a porcelain dish with medicinal syrup. She waves it away, but her message is clear. She's dissatisfied. Perhaps with the temperature of her food. Perhaps with someone at the table. Everyone scrambles internally, hiding it well. You stay still. You are not the subject of her attention, which is the highest success you could have hoped for today. You take another bite of rice, and you breathe. This is how the court eats, not just with mouths, but with eyes, with posture, with silence. Every spoonful is a sentence. Every reach for a dish is a paragraph. The meal itself. A political novel you're writing in real time with no erasers, only consequence. You adjust your grip on your chopsticks and prepare for the next course. Because dessert or what passes for it isn't sweet relief. It's the next test. The servers glide forward again, their robes brushing the lacquered floor in whispers. They carry the next wave of dishes, palace desserts, though calling them desserts in the modern sense would be like calling a moon jar a cereal bowl. These final plates aren't about indulgence. They're about restraint, polished to perfection. Your tray receives its share. A brass saucer of honeyed jujubes, a sliver of dried persimmon curled like a comma, and 2 pale gray rice cakes dusted in fine bean powder. They arrive uncovered, already portioned, already expectant. You glance discreetly at the senior official beside you. He bows slightly before lifting a rice cake. Not the jujubes. That's important. You follow his lead not because you're unsure, but because certainty in court behavior is often punished. Mimicry. When subtle is survival. The rice cake is soft, chewy, faintly sweet, and utterly flavorless unless you've earned the right to taste sugar, which you haven't. Sugar is rare, and the honeyed jujubes are more decoration than edible, reserved for those whose family lines were mentioned favorably in recent court poetry. You chew slowly, listening to the quiet cadence of brass spoons tapping empty bowls. Some officials bow again after each bite. Some sit entirely still. One man, 3 cushions down, has been pretending to sip his tea for 10 minutes, just to avoid engaging with the dried persimmon. Wise. Sticky foods demand facial expressions, and facial expressions are risky. You reach for your barley tea again, cool now, but still soothing. It's the only warm thing in the room besides the soup and the tension. You sip small and soundless. The Queen Dowager lifts her cup one breath later. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe she saw your movement and approved, or disapproved, or didn't notice at all. But now, everyone thinks she did. Welcome to the emotional jungle of meal conclusion. You glance across the room to the Crown Prince, who has barely touched his tray. That's expected. Royals never finish dessert. Finishing implies satisfaction. And satisfaction implies that the food was the highlight of the day, not the governance, not the duty, not the celestial alignment of virtue and obligation. So he eats half a jujube, sets his chopsticks down, and nods once. That single nod launches the silent signal. Utensils begin to lower in order of rank. You do not move until your immediate superior does. He blinks once, finishes the last sip of tea, then gently folds his napkin not into a square, but into a small triangle. Ah, that means thank you not entirely full. You copy the gesture knowing it will be seen by someone. Everything is. Historians still debate whether these dining sequences were crafted purely for structure, or if they evolved from the inherent anxieties of palace life designed to prevent chaos, one rice grain at a time. But to you, sitting in this hall, surrounded by people pretending to not judge each other while judging everything, there's no debate. These aren't just rules. They're armor. And your next move requires another layer. A servant approaches with a small tray bearing wet towels, each folded, scented with pine and wrapped in silk. You accept yours with both hands, unfold it slowly, and press it gently against your fingertips. It's not meant to clean. It's meant to signal. Clean hands mean clean conscience. Even if your conscience is currently doing somersaults over whether your jujube chewing was too decisive, you set the towel down precisely to the left of your tea bowl, angled slightly toward the center of your cushion. A neutral position, neither assertive nor passive. You look up and see that someone across the chamber has left theirs folded in half. Bold, possibly passive-aggressive, possibly tired, possibly sending a message to the royal scribe. You'll find out in 3 days when the court rumors circulate back through the kitchen staff. The king rises. No words, no speech, just the rustle of silk and the lifting of a jade-handled fan. You bow low, forehead, grazing your hands, knees tight to the cushion. You stay bowed until you hear his footsteps fade through the western corridor. Then, and only then, do you lift your head. The meal is over, but you're not done. Now comes the standing ritual. You rise in sequence, pausing at each quarter step, adjusting your robe, collecting your thoughts, and silently rehearsing your exit posture. Hands folded, shoulders back, eyes down, feet quiet. You do not speak. You do not look. You simply exist in controlled retreat. The human equivalent of a paper lantern floating on still water. You pass the last table. The dried persimmon is still there, untouched, which means you pass the test. Probably. You return to your quarters, your stomach neither full nor hungry, just balanced, like everything here. You close the lacquered door behind you and sit on the edge of your mat legs still folded under you, as if the meal never ended. The silence of the dining hall follows you, echoing in your mind louder than any music. You haven't spoken in over an hour yet. You're exhausted, as though your soul has run a marathon, while your body just sat politely with a spoon. You stretch your fingers slowly. They still remember the weight of the metal chopsticks, the delicate pressure of holding a radish slice without letting it slip the exact angle at which you folded the silk towel. Your jaw, too, feels tight. From chewing, yes, but more from not chewing too loudly. In the palace volume is suspicion, and chewing sounds treason, basically. You remember the novice who laughed during an evening meal last year. It wasn't even loud, just a chuckle, soft and harmless, prompted by someone making a subtle pun about chestnut jelly. No one smiled. No one replied. He was removed from the dining rotation for 3 months. When he returned, he didn't speak above a whisper for the rest of the year. So yes, you chew quietly. Even now, hours later, in your private chamber, with no one watching, your teeth still avoid clicking. It's instinct, habit, survival. You lie back staring at the wooden beams above you, carved with lotus motifs, an age darkened by centuries of breath and steam. A breeze pushes through the paper window, carrying a faint trace of grilled barley and pine smoke. Someone else somewhere deeper in the palace is preparing for the next meal already. And you're still processing the last one. Historians still argue whether this quiet dining culture stemmed more from Neo-Confucian ideals or pre-existing aristocratic sensitivities inherited from earlier dynasties. What you know for certain is that at a Joseon court meal, your throat tightens not from spice, but from fear of sounding impolite. In fact, there's a specific technique you've practiced lifting the food with chopsticks, placing it just behind your front teeth, and using your tongue to press it to the roof of your mouth. No chewing, just quiet dissolving. It works great for tofu, terrible for dried radish. You learned the hard way. You sit up again and pour yourself a cup of barley tea from the small clay pot on your table. The tea is lukewarm now with that nutty earthiness that settles somewhere between nostalgia and medicine. You sip, and the sound is barely audible. just a gentle hiss like silk brushing silk. You recall how one of the consorts once slurped too eagerly during a ceremonial dinner. No one corrected her. They didn't have to. She corrected herself visibly for weeks. Tiny sips after that. Her meals became silent performances of penance. You look down at the surface of your tea. Your reflection is small and distorted, but even it looks tense. You shake your head slightly. Let it go. You remember what one of the kitchen elders whispered once while layering sweet rice cakes. The loudest people are the ones who cook. Everyone else just chews their shame. She was only half joking. You rise and stretch your arms over your head, letting your robe fall back into shape. You walk barefoot across the wooden floor, each step absorbed by the age of the planks. You've walked this path too many times to count from quarters to kitchen, from kitchen to hall, from hall to nowhere. Always quiet, always deliberate. You open the window and let in more of the early evening air. From here, you can see the tiled roofs stretch out like the backs of sleeping dragons, their edges curved skyward, their shadows long and elegant. The trees sway. Lanterns are being lit. A servant laughs far away, unaware that their sound will probably cost them a night scrubbing brass. And still, a part of you envies them. You sit again at your desk and run a cloth over your utensils. It's not required. No one checks. But you do it anyway. A clean spoon. A polished chopstick that's peace of mind. Not just cleanliness. Not just duty. It's protection. Because if you ever drop one at court, it won't just be your hand that slips. It'll be your entire standing. You fold the cloth neatly and place the utensils back in their tray. You blow out one of the candles. The flame dies with a sigh, and the shadows stretch longer. You didn't chew loudly. Not once. You survived another meal. Outside your chamber, dusk deepens into that soft velvet blue, the kind of light that dims detail and silences intention. The palace exhales. Torches flicker along the corridors, casting dancing shadows on the red lacquered beams. Somewhere deeper within the court, you hear a gate creak open, not loud, but purposeful. That would be the evening courier delivering missives too sensitive for the daytime eyes. You're not summoned tonight. A small relief, but it's also unsettling, like hearing nothing from someone who usually criticizes your every move. You tidy your mat, light one candle, and pull your robe tighter. The layers still hold the scent of sesame oil and brass polish. You could wash it, but that would risk looking too clean at breakfast, which might make people think you're covering something up. So you sit and wait, because you're due back in the dining hall. Not for a meal, for observation. Tonight you'll be serving as a secondary note-taker at a smaller gathering. A meeting between two high ministers and a royal consort cloaked under the guise of an informal meal. These are the ones you learn the most from. The side dishes are fewer, but the tension is thicker than bean paste. You gather your small ink tablet, your folding mat, and slip into the hall through the rear entrance. Already the room smells different, less ceremonial, more intimate, but not relaxed. Never relaxed. 3 trays are laid out. Each contains 7 dishes, not the full 15 you saw this morning, but still arranged with maddening precision. Fish glazed in plum syrup, shredded radish soaked in sweet vinegar, pan-fried mung bean pancakes cut into clean triangles. Every item calibrated to reflect courtesy without suggesting opulence. You kneel near the wall behind a wooden screen carved with cranes. You're not here to eat. You're here to listen. The diners enter. A rustle of robes. Soft, deliberate coughs. One of the ministers clears his throat too forcefully, and the consort raises a single eyebrow, Her version of a public rebuke. He bows just slightly. Course corrected. They sit unfold napkins with the grace of scholars preparing scrolls and begin. No announcements, no toasts, just the gentle lift of a spoon. And then it happens. The pickle tray arrives again. But this one is different. Fewer items. More curated. Seaweed lightly dressed in sesame. Slivers of yellow pickled radish arranged like flower petals. And one pale green slice of cucumber placed slightly off-center. To anyone else, it's just garnish. To you, it's a message. Historians still puzzle over whether visual cues in royal meals were actually intended as political commentary or just stylized plating techniques. But you've watched enough of these to know the tray says what the diners won't. That cucumber is directed at the southern official seated farthest from the consort. It's an inside reference. He once banned cucumbers from trade levies to spite a rival province. Everyone knew. Everyone remembers. You watch his face. He doesn't flinch. But he skips the pickles. That is his reply. You continue your quiet work, writing notes in small brushstrokes on a folding paper tucked in your sleeve. Not names, not direct quotes, just symbols. Arrangement, timing, reaction. It's less documentation and more shadow script. The consort shifts the tray clockwise, sending the cucumber to the next person. This time, the official smiles before selecting it. A risk. A deliberate one. And just like that, you've seen the entire structure of a pending alliance unfold in 3 chopstick motions. You lower your gaze, finishing your notation, and let the tea cool beside you. You won't drink it. You weren't offered any. But it sits there anyway, symbolic. A prop to match your silence. The meal ends with the simplest offering, a pear sliced but unpeeled. Each slice has a single drop of cinnamon water brushed across its edge. The scent is faint, and the spice is considered invigorating, appropriate for evening negotiation. The guests bow and leave without a word. You rise only after their footsteps fade. The trays are removed, the screens folded. The room empties, but the echo of what just passed remains like a fine mist. You walk slowly back to your quarters. Not because you're tired, but because you need to forget what you just saw, at least on the surface. These unspoken rules aren't written in books. They're passed on in glances on trays, in the curl of a vegetable, in the temperature of tea. You close your door behind you. You sit again. You breathe. And you wonder what story your own rice bowl told tonight. The candle in your room has burned halfway down, casting long golden ovals on the floor and tremulous shadows on the wall. You haven't moved in some time. Not out of stiffness or fatigue, but because your thoughts are still turning slow, deliberate revolutions, like the motion of a soup ladle across royal broth. Your eyes rest on your folded robe, still lying where you left it after the meeting. The scent of the pear lingers faintly cinnamon and sweetness, a reminder that even fruit carries meaning. You remember how the official accepted the cucumber earlier. How subtle, how skillful. You wonder what you would have done. Probably fumbled the chopsticks and started a diplomatic incident. Outside your window, the cicadas are in full chorus now, their droning song rising and falling like waves across the garden walls. The heat of the day has faded, but not completely. It hangs like a final spoonful of rice, heavy, inevitable. There's a knock at your door. 3 soft taps. You rise and open it slowly. A servant stands there, candle in hand, eyes down. "You've been requested," she whispers. "Midnight tea service." Your stomach dips slightly. Not fear exactly, but the anticipation that comes from knowing you'll be walking into a room where tea isn't just tea. You wrap your robe, light your second candle, and follow her through the corridor. The palace is different at night. Not quieter, just quieter in tone. The daytime hum is replaced by the softer rhythm of wind and footsteps. The courtyards seem deeper. The halls stretch longer. You arrive at a narrow chamber you've never entered before. It's not grand. No murals, no phoenix ceiling. Just a low table, 3 cushions, and a single brass teapot resting atop a folded napkin. He's already there, the prince. Not the crown prince, mind you, but one of the lesser ones. The 5th son of the 2nd queen. A man too intelligent to be ignored and too peripheral to be fully trusted. You bow low. He gestures to sit. You do. He pours the tea himself. A breach of protocol. A statement. The tea is ginseng with jujube. Slightly bitter. Meant to clear the head. He doesn't speak for a long time. Just sips. Finally, he says, "The meal today. What did you notice?" You pause. This is a trap disguised as a question. He wants insight, but not arrogance. He wants observation, but not speculation. You consider your response like you'd consider which pickle to reach for first. I noticed the minister from Gangi took his soup later than the rest, you say. A neutral statement. A safe move. Observational, but not revealing. He nods. And you look at the tea's surface. No ripples. The dried lotus root was left untouched by the consort you offer. This is riskier. The consort isn't his ally, but it's also not his enemy. That means you've walked into the center of a tightrope, and now you have to finish crossing. He smiles. Not kindly, but not coldly either. You have a careful tongue, he says. That's a dying art. You bow again more deeply this time. Then he changes the subject. Do you know why slurping tea is sometimes permitted during night service? You blink. Is this rhetorical? I do not, you answer honestly. He leans in, one hand still wrapped around the cup, because at night he says sound is intention. If you slurp it, means you are awake, alert, listening. The quiet ones, they're the ones you watch. You nod slowly. He didn't drink his tea loudly, which means you're the one he's watching. The rest of the tea service proceeds without conversation. You sip quietly, but not too quietly, calibrating your slurp to imply focus, not fear. Historians still argue whether these late-night meetings were informal or structured, whether they fostered genuine discussion, or were just extensions of daylight theater. But in the moment you understand their purpose, they allow words to walk in, where swords would only stumble. When the prince finishes his cup, he stands. No farewell, no thanks, just a glance. You bow once more and leave. The candle flickers as you walk back to your quarters. The corridors seem narrower now, the shadows more watchful. You close the door behind you and set the candle down. You don't drink any more tea. You don't chew anything. You just sit there, quietly, thinking. Because here in the court of midnight and rice, the loudest truths are spoken without a single word. You wake before the birds. Not because you're disciplined, but because your mind never really turned off. The walls may sleep, but the rules do not. They coil and settle into your thoughts like steam settling into a cold bowl. Your robe is still folded. Your notes from last night are tucked beneath your mat, unmarked, of course. Anything written about midnight tea stays unspoken, invisible. You rise, wash your hands in a cold basin, and splash your face. There's a whisper of ginseng still lingering on your tongue. Breakfast is hours away. But you don't need food right now. You need positioning. which is why you find yourself outside the central pavilion before dawn. A subtle gesture, just sitting near the garden path where the advisors tend to stroll, pretending to admire the pine trees while calculating who's falling out of favor. You're not here to intercept. You're here to be seen just once. Calm, thoughtful, awake. And sure enough, you hear the familiar creak of the Minister of Record's walking stick. You remain seated, head bowed slightly, hands resting on your knees. He doesn't stop, but he notices, which is the whole point. You return to your quarters just in time to change robes, this time pale gray, a neutral color. After midnight tea, neutrality is safety. As you prepare to re-enter the dining hall for the day's first formal meal, a servant passes you a folded note. No name, just a symbol, a plum blossom pressed into the parchment. You don't open it. Not yet. Inside the hall, the setting is the same, but everything feels different. There's a current running through the air, an electricity that has nothing to do with weather, and everything to do with what wasn't said yesterday. You take your place, kneel at your mat, and glance across the room. The man who dropped his chopsticks yesterday is not present. No one mentions it. That's how erasure works in the court. Not with shouts, but with silence. Today's meal begins with a thick rice porridge lightly salted and topped with black sesame seeds, a dish favored by those needing to recover from something. An illness, a mistake, a late-night political misstep. You wonder who it's for. You keep your eyes down and sip slowly, careful not to stir the bottom of the bowl where the rice is thickest. Stirring too early implies impatience. Next comes the soup milky bone broth, delicate, meant to coat the tongue. You drink in measured intervals, matching the older official beside you, who once served as tutor to the now deceased third prince. He chews exactly 30 times per bite. You know this because you counted. Twice. And now, so do you. The pickles today are fewer. Only 3 kinds. That means the meal is signaling restraint, modesty, humility. Someone important is being scolded in the background. Possibly several someones. You keep your bites small. No kimchi yet. Too bold. You reach instead for the soybean sprout salad, soft, easy to chew, politically silent. Historians still argue whether the sequencing of side dishes was based on flavor pairings or hidden messages. But within these walls, the truth is clear. Each dish arrives with purpose. Each absence speaks louder than most poetry. Then the Queen Dowager enters the hall. Unscheduled. She doesn't take her usual seat. She stands beside the serving table, eyes scanning the bowls, lips set in a perfect line that somehow contains 3 generations of disappointment. Everyone freezes mid-bite. You do not breathe. She lifts the lid of a brass bowl. Cold namul greens, simple rural, not fit for her table. She turns, steps back, and exits. That moment, the lifting of a lid, the revealing of a choice, becomes the dominant narrative of the day. No one will say it aloud, but every choice henceforth will be shadowed by that gesture. You look at your rice. Still warm. You finish it slowly. You fold your napkin into a tight triangle, same as before, same as always. Except this time, you do it just a fraction of a second before your superior. He notices, which means the balance has shifted. Slightly. After the meal, you walk calmly down the corridor, past the cypress trees into the small stone courtyard, where the wind catches the hem of your robe like it's trying to tell you something. You finally open the note. Inside is a single sentence. Do not bow first. No name, no context. Just strategy. You fold it again. Tuck it into your sleeve. and smile, because today's meal may be over, but the real dining begins long after the bowls are empty. The note stays tucked in your sleeve, its weight far greater than paper should allow. Do not bow first. It echoes in your head, timed perfectly with your footsteps as you walk the outer corridors of the palace. You nod politely at those you pass, but bow to no one. Not today. You're aware that this choice could be read as confidence, or arrogance, or ignorance. But in the court, all three often look the same, and how they're interpreted depends not on you, but on who's watching. You head toward the southern wing where the lesser officials take their midday meal, not the full ceremonial breakfast, but a second more casual gathering. Still courtly, still silent, but looser. The rules bend here slightly. Not enough to snap, just enough to see who knows how to lean. You take your seat near the window, sunlight striping the table. Your tray is more modest. This time, a single bowl of barley rice, 2 pickled radishes, 1 slice of grilled fish, and a soup of daikon and tofu. Comfort food, you might say, if comfort were allowed. You notice the man to your left, young newly appointed robe, too crisp to be believable. He bows to you. You nod in return, not bowing first. He registers it. No offense taken. No smile either. This is the game. The daikon soup is hot. You sip it slowly, aware that the older man across from you has paused mid-bite to adjust his sleeve. A delay tactic. He's waiting. You spoon a piece of tofu, set it down, then fold your napkin beside your bowl. Another delay. Whoever breaks the rhythm first sets the tone for the table. Eventually he moves. A spoonful. A choice. You follow measured, neither leading nor lagging. Historians often overlook these meals in their records, preferring the grand banquets and royal decrees. But this is where the actual power shifts. In the silences between bites. In who chooses what. When. You pick up a radish slice with your chopsticks, holding it still for just a beat longer than necessary. A cue. The official beside you mirrors the motion. Synchrony. Temporary alliance. Witnessed by the man across from you who now has to decide whether to join the pattern or risk looking like the odd flavor out. He picks up the grilled fish instead. A divergence. Interesting. You keep eating. Halfway through the meal, a subtle change occurs. One of the serving girls switches a tray at the head of the room, her sleeve brushing a teacup, causing it to rattle softly. A break in the quiet. The young official glances up. The older one does not. You sip your soup. Carefully. Purposefully. The noise has reset the room's energy. Now it's your move. You reach for the second radish slice, but before you do, you glance up. The older man meets your gaze, just for a breath. Then he bows. It's small, barely perceptible, but it's first. You nod back. Inside your pulse stills. You've just been acknowledged. You were not supposed to lead. You were supposed to obey the hierarchy. But today you didn't bow first, and no one stopped you. After the meal, you return to the courtyard, hands folded inside your sleeves. You hear footsteps behind you. Light, unhurried. A voice soft and familiar. You moved like someone with a note. You turn. The prince again. He's not smiling, but he's not scowling either. He walks beside you for a few paces, then stops beside a stone bench under a plum tree. You followed it well, he says. You don't respond. Not immediately, because you know better than to answer too quickly. I didn't expect the records minister to blink, he adds, brushing a leaf from his sleeve. You incline your head just slightly. He sits. You remain standing. Another test. After 10 long seconds, he gestures 2 fingers barely raised. You sit. Do you know why I sent you that note? He asks. You shake your head. I didn't. You look up. It wasn't from me, he says, sipping from a gourd of water. But someone wanted you seen. Silence again. A breeze passes between you, rustling the plum blossoms above. Next time, he says, you may not get a warning. You nod. Understood. He hands you the empty gourd, a gesture that says, we're finished, without saying it. You rise, bow not first, not last, and walk back toward your quarters. Gourd in hand, note still in your sleeve, and 1,000 new questions blooming quietly in your head, like blossoms waiting for dusk. You carry the gourd all the way back to your quarters without spilling a drop, even though it's empty. The gesture matters more than the weight. In the palace, everything you carry says something about your purpose, your connections, your memory. An empty vessel can hold 100 silent stories if delivered to the right hands. When you enter your room, you place it down beside your cushion with care. The note remains hidden in your sleeve, its words as sharp and fresh as when you first read them. Do not bow first. You haven't. And the air around you feels subtly different. Not safer, just clearer, like morning fog that's finally burned away, revealing more of the path beneath your feet. You kneel and open your daily log, a personal one, folded tightly and kept within the lining of your pillow mat. Not the official records. This one is just for you. You record no names, only gestures. The timing of a lifted spoon. The absence of sesame oil on a dish where it's usually present. The decision to serve fermented soybean paste without chili. All data. All memory. You add one more line. A bow delayed is a message received. Then footsteps. Again. A servant appears in your doorway without knocking. That means something urgent. Or something political. Possibly both. You rise. Kitchen request, she whispers. You've been asked to assist in the private preparation room. Now that's unusual. You're not a cook. You're not a taster. You're a scribe with observant eyes and an unbroken streak of quiet compliance. But sometimes that's exactly why you're chosen. The private preparation room isn't near the main kitchen. It's buried deeper, closer to the inner women's quarters. Less noise, fewer eyes, and usually no men. You enter with a bow. The room is warm, and not just from the stove. There are 3 older women at the table, one pounding rice flour, the other cutting yams into thin ribbons, and the third steeping ginger in black tea. At the center is a dish you don't recognize. Fish. Yes, but wrapped in honeyed leaves and dusted with powdered chrysanthemum. Reserved for one of 2 events, ancestral rites, or a veiled apology. They don't speak to you, just gesture for you to sit. They hand you a small stack of rice papers and an ink brush. Write one line, one of them says without looking up. To be folded beneath the plate. You blink. That's not a recipe note. That's a message. You dip the brush. What do you write? You're not told what this dish is for. You don't know who will eat it. But you understand the weight. You breathe steady the brush and write. The bitterest taste leaves no stain when swallowed whole. You fold the paper twice and pass it forward. The woman wraps it inside a linen bundle, tucks it beneath the fish, and says nothing. That's when you realize this dish isn't for the king. It's for the Queen Dowager. A quiet reconciliation, perhaps. or a subtle rebuke wrapped in candied regret. Either way, your line has now entered the bloodstream of palace history, hidden under the folds of a ceremonial plate. You are dismissed. No nod, no words, just silence. You walk back to your quarters slowly, every step carrying echoes of things you cannot name. You pass the stone lanterns near the library. One of them has gone out. An omen. A breeze. You're not superstitious, but you remember what happened the last time a lantern died before a feast. 2 appointments were reversed, and a favored advisor lost favor overnight. You relight the lantern, not because you believe, but because you remember. That evening, your meal arrives later than usual. A single bowl of barley porridge and pickled burdock. Simple, nourishing, devoid of message. You eat slowly, appreciating its plainness, its lack of metaphor. You finish and fold your napkin tightly, almost with gratitude. And just as you're about to extinguish your candle for the night, you find another note. Tucked under the bowl, not folded, not sealed. Just one sentence. If they taste it and do not flinch, the door remains closed. You reread it 3 times. You don't know what dish it refers to, but you know exactly what it means. You sit in stillness, the note resting in your lap like a pebble that refuses to cool. If they taste it and do not flinch, the door remains closed. It's not a warning. It's not a threat. It's a map, one drawn in metaphor, handed to you without compass or light. But you know this terrain. You've been walking its unlit edges since your first meal in the court. You place the note into your sleeve next to the first. The paper rustles against itself like 2 secrets, brushing shoulders in a narrow hallway. Outside, night has returned fully now, draping the palace in its deep indigo hush. From your chamber, you hear the faint notes of a hagium, not a formal performance, but practice possibly from the outer music hall. The melody wavers unfinished, then halts. Perhaps the player like you is distracted by things that can't be played out loud. You lie back, letting your head rest against the rolled mat. You try to sleep, but the court never really lets you rest. Even dreams here have rules. You drift for a while, until a sound pulls you back. Not loud, just different. A footfall, soft and uncertain, pauses outside your door. Then a single knock. Not a summons, not an order. A conversation asking permission. You rise, robe still wrapped, and open the door. A young servant stands there, barely older than a child, holding a wooden tray. On it, a cup of warm tea and a folded cloth. For the one who wrote the line, he says softly, "You blink. What line?" But he doesn't answer. He simply bows and vanishes into the night. You set the tray down, unfold the cloth, and find a reply. Ink on linen. Unusual, but deeply intentional. Swallowed it was, but bitterness remains. She remembers. You sit down slowly. The tea is barley again, unsweetened, too hot to sip yet. She remembers. The Queen Dowager read your line, ate the fish, and chose not to close the door yet. The game continues. You breathe deeply and sip the tea once it cools. It tastes like ash and possibility. In the morning, the meal is quieter than usual. Tension buzzes beneath the clink of brass bowls and the low murmur of sleeves brushing silk mats. You're seated farther back this time, not demotion, just a different vantage. But it's enough for you to see who's speaking and who isn't. You count 9 dishes today, an odd number. Rare, intentional. It signals dissonance. The palace is unsettled. You eat with practiced focus. The pickles today are bitter melon sharp, not typically served in spring, but it matches the mood. Across the room, one of the Queen Dowager's close attendants lowers her spoon early, placing it on the left side instead of the center of the tray. A message: the dish was received, but it was not forgiven. Historians still argue whether dining gestures like that held weight, or if we're simply romanticizing restraint. But in a palace where silence is louder than speech, the left side spoon is thunder. You bow at the end of the meal, but not to anyone in particular. Just to the table. The moment. The rules that held everything together like warm rice in cold hands. After the meal, you're called not by the prince this time, but by an older official one who rarely speaks unless the wind is truly shifting. He invites you into his study, a dark room lined with scrolls that haven't been read in years, but still remember being important. He gestures for you to sit. You do. I've read the lines, he says. You don't respond. I didn't know your ink had teeth. Still, you say nothing. He pours tea, oolong thick and almost medicinal. She wants a reply, he says. Now you speak. Another dish. He smiles faintly. No. That door is closed. Your pulse skips. But another window may open, he adds. He slides a folded square of silk across the table. Inside is a poem. 4 lines. Not yours, but meant for you to deliver. He doesn't say from whom. He doesn't need to. It's your turn now. You fold the silk, place it in your robe, and bow. This time first. Not from submission, but from awareness. You leave the study with more questions than answers, but also more place. The palace always feeds you, but today it started to use you, and strangely that means you've arrived. The silk poem burns quietly against your chest as you walk through the gardens. Your steps light, but your thoughts heavy. The air is warm now, clinging faintly to your skin, filled with the scent of early jasmine and pine smoke. You know where you're going, though. No one told you the destination. That's how this part of court life works. Every direction is felt, not spoken. You reach the side pavilion by the koi pond. It's secluded, shielded by flowering trees and curved walls that make sound behave like secrets. A court lady waits there, already seated under the painted eaves, her robes the deep plum of the Queen Dowager's household. She doesn't look up when you arrive. She just gestures to the spot across from her and pours 2 cups of tea. You sit. She unfolds her fan and fans herself, once, then stops. A signal. You mirror the gesture exactly. Only then does she speak. The silk. You take it from your sleeve, pass it to her with both hands. She doesn't open it right away. She places it beside her tea as if it might need to steep. Instead, she asks, "Do you know what the poem means?" You pause. "No," you say, "and I don't want to pretend I do." She smiles, small, controlled. Good. Only now does she unfold the silk. Her eyes scan the lines, then close briefly as if tasting the words in her mind. The breeze shifts slightly. The koi ripple the surface of the pond without making a sound. She's testing the edges of the frame, the woman says. She can't move openly, but she can make you move. You know she means the Queen Dowager, and you begin to understand. This isn't a conversation about poetry. It's a negotiation over silence. Why me, you ask? She sets her cup down gently. Because you know how to speak without speaking. That's rarer than bloodlines. She folds the silk again and tucks it into her sleeve. You'll be asked to write again. Soon. Then without rising, she says, and when you do not write with your brush. You bow, low, and leave. As you walk back through the shaded path, your eyes scan the ground automatically. There are pebbles here, arranged in patterns. One set of 3, then one set of 2. Markers. Not messages exactly, but placement codes. Someone is watching where people walk, and perhaps leaving notes only feet can read. You step around them. The meal bell rings faintly in the distance. Not for the grand hall this time, just for the inner quarters. You won't be attending. Instead, a smaller meal is brought to your room personally by the prince's attendant. She doesn't speak as she places the tray down, but the tray is different. Rice, clear broth, no pickles, but the fish grilled with no glaze, skin crisped, bone intact, and on the side 2 small pears, not sliced, whole. You stare at them. This is not random. In court dining, fruit is never served whole unless it carries a meaning. Whole pears mean clarity, integrity, a sign that something is to be received without being divided, or worse, that the sender refuses to let something be shared. You lift one pear, turn it gently in your hand. Its skin is perfect, cold from storage, but heavy. You place it back down and eat your rice. Slowly, deliberately. You chew with your lips pressed shut. Not because anyone's watching, but because you've learned that you are someone now, and someone is always listening. When you finish, you fold the napkin around the pears and set them aside. You won't eat them. Not yet. You will offer them back somehow. Because in this place, refusing a message is sometimes louder than delivering one. That night, you sit at your desk and prepare your brush. You grind the ink. But you do not write. Instead, you place the brush across the inkstone like a bridge. Then you blow out the lamp. A gesture. And if they ask tomorrow why you didn't write the reply, they'll know. You heard the court lady. You do not write with your brush. You wake with your brush still resting across the inkstone untouched. The morning air has cooled slightly, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine as if the palace itself exhaled during the night. You sit up slowly, wrap your robe and glance toward the folded pears. Still there, still whole. Their skin now beginning to dim slightly as if time were gently pressing a fingerprint into them. No one knocks this morning. No summons. No messages. The silence itself feels like a test. You eat nothing. You write nothing. You wait. By midday, the stillness has weight. Then finally a rustle outside. A folded napkin is slid under your door. No words. No symbols. Just cloth. You unfold it. Inside a single, dried plum. That's all. You stare at it wondering. Not bitter. Not sweet. A memory fruit. Served when something is about to close or begin. You place it on the tray with the pears and sit back. Now it's your turn. Not to write, but to speak without sound. You take the 2 whole pears and the plum and wrap them in a square of plain white silk. You don't label it. You don't seal it. You simply place it in a small wooden box and walk quietly, robe trailing behind you like a soft question, toward the old tree by the library courtyard. That's where the kitchen staff leave the offerings for those who know where to look. You place the box beneath the tree, bow once, and walk away. No one sees, except someone always sees. That evening, you are not invited to dine. Instead, you're asked to observe again. A private dinner between the prince and a scholar from the southern provinces. The food is simple, modest, but you notice one bowl contains a poached pear, halved, seeds removed, simmered in honey. The prince doesn't eat it, but he touches the spoon to its edge. And you know, the message was received. The door is neither closed nor open, but you are now standing in its shadow. Later that night, you return to your quarters. The tray has been cleared. The brush remains untouched. You lift it and clean it with slow, precise strokes. And for the first time in days, you sleep deeply. No dreams, just silence. Wind down 300 words. Now the court fades behind you. Let the lacquered halls soften. The brass bowls grow dim. Let the hush of the dining chamber stretch into distance like a dream you're no longer asked to interpret. You've done enough today. No more notes to read. No more utensils to hold like weapons. No more watching the tilt of a spoon or the edge of a pear for hidden meaning. Just breathe now. Feel the weight of stillness settle into your chest, not heavy, but grounding. Let your spine soften, your shoulders drop. Feel your jaw unclench, the muscles around your eyes release. Even here, in this imaginary palace, you're allowed to rest. The walls are warm. The mat is soft. The air moves like the slow ripple of tea in a porcelain cup. No one is watching now. No one is listening. You are alone, but not forgotten. The meal is over. The stories are paused, and the tray has been cleared. Let yourself drift like a wisp of incense. Let the last sounds of the day, rustling silk, muted footsteps, the distant splash of water over rice blur into a quiet that holds you gently. You're not being tested. You're not being studied. You are simply still. And in this stillness, something ancient and kind begins to settle. Sleep now, and may your dreams unfold as delicately as rice paper.